Guess what? I just had a test for COVID-19 and I've got to self-isolate for 3 days. I probably don't have it, but they're testing asymptomatic people here in Victoria, so I've had my brain scraped and everything is going well. So while I'm self-isolating, it's probably a good time to talk about a movie. We all have comfort movies that you can watch every year or so, and it doesn't matter how many times you've seen them, they're like chicken soup for your mind. And I've got a few comfort films. I must have 20 of them. But this is definitely one of them. I first saw it back in the VHS days on a VHS rental tape, and I've liked it ever since. It's a movie directed by Martin Campbell, who directed GoldenEye amongst other things. But it's a very atypical movie in his oeuvre. It's set in 1948 in Los Angeles, where magic is used. And it's a movie called Cast a Deadly Spell, starring Fred Ward, Clancy Brown, Julianne Moore, and David Warner. And I'm going to tell you about it in a moment. Of all of the actors working in the 1990s, Fred Ward's probably the one you would pick to play a hard-boiled private eye. But he didn't do it very much. He made all sorts of interesting films. He was in Tremors with Kevin Bacon. He played Henry Miller in Henry and June. Has a really solid career. He was in Shortcuts. He was in The Player. So he did a couple of movies there for Altman. Really nice actor. Got a rough face, but he's got the perfect face to play a private eye. And in this case, he's playing a private eye called Phil Lovecraft. Yes, I know, H. Philip Lovecraft. Who, in the 1948 Los Angeles of the movie where everybody is using magic, is the only guy who doesn't use magic. He's a private eye. He's having trouble paying his rent to his landlady, who is a licensed witch called Hippolyta Kropotkin, played by Anisha Walker, who also runs a dance studio. Lovecraft gets a job from a guy called Hackshaw, played by David Warner, who's always creepy in movies. He was Jack the Ripper in Time After Time with Malcolm McDowell, as you might recall. In this one, Hackshaw wants Lovecraft to find a book that has gone missing. It just happens to be the Necronomicon, the Bible of the H.P. Lovecraft Elder Gods mythology. His investigation leads him to the Dunwich Club, run by his ex-police partner Harry Borden, played by Clancy Brown, with a really evil-looking mustache. And it's there where we see the femme fatale of the piece. Connie Stone, Lovecraft's ex-girlfriend, who is now with Borden, played in an early role by Julianne Moore. And she actually brings some great acting to this film. It's not a role that particularly needed somebody to bring their A game to, but she gives the character a depth and a complexity and a sexiness that is kind of surprising. I love it when somebody does a small film but shows how good they are in it. It's not that it overwhelms the other characters, but it just makes the world and the plot and the relationship feel real. And she does a really good job on that.
Sweet old Phil, subtle as a flagpole.
The music in this one's really good too. A guy called Kurt Sobel composed it. And one of the songs, which is dubbed for Julianne Moore, won an Emmy Award. So the music's great. The scenery and the sense of it being 1948 Los Angeles with weird things happening is really well portrayed. There are werewolves, there are voodoo dolls, there are gremlins in cars. There are all sorts of other little bits of supernatural stuff going on that really do give us a nice bit of world building. World building is something that's really hard to do. I don't think that recent thing that Will Smith did with the trolls and the ogres and stuff did it as well as Cast a Deadly Spell. This one really punches above its weight. It was made on a budget of about $15 million by HBO Films back in the day, and it was meant as a television movie, but it really does work. It gives us an interesting plot. The special effects aren't as good as a modern movie would have, because they're all practical effects done on a fairly limited budget by Alterian Studios. But you've got to allow a certain leeway there. They just simply didn't have the technology to do it the way we would do it now. But this movie has a really nice place in my heart for a number of reasons. I like 1948 Hollywood as a setting. I like the supernatural aspects of it. I like the characters. The music's great. And there are some really nice bits of dialogue in here. The hard-boiled dialogue is sharply written and sharply delivered, and that really makes or breaks this kind of film. There are some nice little callbacks to other movies as well. There's a scene where somebody writes out a rune and gives it to Lovecraft, and that conjures a demon. That harks back to Jacques Tourneur's Curse of the Demon from the 1950s. The more you know about the horror movies, the more you're going to get out of this one. It just really is a class act. It's very hard to find on VHS, but it has in the past streamed on Amazon Prime in certain markets. Unfortunately not in Australia. But Cast a Deadly Spell is a movie you should definitely see. And the good news, kind of, is that there was a sequel. Set in the 1950s during the McCarthy era, it's a movie called Witch Hunt. Instead of Fred Ward, unfortunately, they have Dennis Hopper playing Lovecraft, and he plays it in a very different way. Some of the supporting characters are still the same, and it does have a couple of advantages, one of which is Eric Bogosian, the great Eric Bogosian from Talk Radio, plays a United States Senator who is very anti-communist and anti-witchcraft, and Bogosian gets a chance to go on a bit of a rant several times during this movie. So if you get a chance to see Witch Hunt, see that as well. But the one that I like better is Cast a Deadly Spell. I just think it works at so many levels, and it's such fun to watch. Thank you very much for watching. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. You can also go to my Patreon at patreon.com/paleocinema and throw me a few bucks towards the production costs of the channel. I hope you watched Cast a Deadly Spell. Let me know whether you liked it or not, and which of those 1990s VHS era movies really grabs you. There were just so many movies and so much product being put out in those days that there's an immense wealth of kind of B pictures for us to enjoy. I will catch you next time. In the meantime, watch good movies, watch bad movies, watch Cast a Deadly Spell and Witch Hunt, and I'll see you then.